Okay, so now let's talk about the evidence for climate change. How do we know that the climate of the Earth is getting warmer? Because that's what we think is happening. So one line of evidence is going to be microfossils. And so there are certain kinds of plants that have pollen. And some of these kinds of plants like hot weather, and some of these kinds of plants like cold weather. And so by looking at the kind of pollen that is in sediments, we can figure out what was the temperature like when that pollen was deposited in the sediments. So we can date the sediments, and then we remove the pollen from the sediment and we analyze it. And if we find pollen that came from a plant that likes hot weather, then we can surmise what the temperature was like during that time period. And so off there to the side there, you see how the climate of the Earth has changed. Then another way is oxygen isotope ratios. So let's talk about what an isotope is. An isotope means it's the same element, but it has different numbers of neutrons in its nucleus. So for example, ordinary hydrogen has 1 proton. So this number down here is the number of protons that hydrogen has. And every hydrogen always has 1 proton. Okay, then up here, this number is going to be the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. So ordinary hydrogen has 1 proton and 0 neutrons. So 1 plus 0 would be 1. So this is a particular isotope of hydrogen. Now there's another isotope of hydrogen though, called deuterium, that's going to have 1 proton and it's going to have 1 neutron. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So this is another isotope of hydrogen. Now they're both hydrogen, so chemically they're the same. It's just that this one would be heavier because it's got the extra neutron in its nucleus. So you can also have isotopes of oxygen. So you could have oxygen, and you could have heavy oxygen, and then you could have light oxygen. And that oxygen could be incorporated into water because water is H2O. So you could have heavier water and you can have lighter water. Now let's assume that it gets hot. So the hotter the climate gets, the more the oceans evaporate. So that would mean that the lighter isotopes of water would be more likely to evaporate than the heavier ones. So that means that there in the oceans during hot weather, there's going to be a higher ratio of the heavier oxygen isotopes to the lighter ones because the lighter ones have gone into the atmosphere. Now, you've got some animals that are going to take materials out of the ocean water and then use that to build their shells. So it's possible then that the shells would record the isotope ratios. And then all you got to do is analyze that shell, and then based on the ratio, you can figure out what the temperature of the Earth was whenever that was happening. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we will talk about some more evidence for climate change.